Good afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. Today is 11th July, celebrated worldwide as World Population Day. And to mark this day, we are going to have a special lecture called Population and Society. This lecture is going to be translated in sign language. So let us try to understand first what is the 11th of July, why it is celebrated as Population Day, and also the key objective. After that, we will try to understand some of the key concepts which are necessary for understanding population and the relation it has with society. So to begin with, we know that this day, 11 July, is celebrated as World Population Day. And this is a day that kind of focuses our attention to the urgency and importance of population issues. Issues in the sense that in many developing countries, the rate of population is kind of exceeding and it's going to reach the 8 million mark in 2022. So this is actually the reason why we need to be concerned about population and the issues connected to population explosion, overpopulation, and so on. Now, every year there is a theme. This year theme, that is 2022 theme, is a world of 8 billion towards a resilient future for all, harnessing opportunities and ensuring rights and choices for all. Now, what we get out of this theme is that the population is growing at a very high rate. Resources which is at the availability of human is less. So we need to kind of create a balance between population and the resources in order to create a society which is egalitarian, just, and there is denial of inequality, exploitation, and mainly hunger. So we know this is also connected to the Sustainable Development Goal, where hunger and poverty are marked as one of these development goals to be achieved. Now, 2011, the world had reached 7 billion. The year number will hit 8 billion, prompting attendance with response. That is, we need to kind of response to the increase of population to 8 billion. If we look at the trend, we'll see how fast the world population is growing. 1805, the population reached 1 billion. And this almost took us more than 100 or 200 years to reach to be 1 million population. And then we say by 1987, the population was 5 billion. That is 183 years. And if you look into the period in which the billion is being covered, it's getting reduced. By 2011, it became 7 billion. 2022, it's going to reach 8 billion. And 2032, it's going to be almost reaching 9 billion. So by say by 2050s, early 2050s, we are going to be 10 billion population of the world. And that is why it is very important to kind of think about how to control population, or in order to kind of have a balanced population ratio equation. So now we try to understand the history of World Population Day. Why did we choose 11 July? And the reason is that in 1987, it was on 11th July that the world population became 5 billion. That is, it was observed as 5 billion day. It was therefore kind of recognized as a day to be celebrated as World Population Day. So every year, it is kind of internationally recognized, and lot of activities, lot of programs are organized by government institutions, by other sectors, and so on. So if we look into the World Population Day, was actually established in 1989 by the Council of United Nations Development Program, UNDP. World Population Day highlights the growing problem, and we'll be looking through some of the problems which is very kind of known to one and all, problems which is associated with the rising population. So that is specifically to highlight And the main objective of 11 July World Population Day is to increase awareness that people have about a number of different population issues. And these issues include human rights, maternal health, poverty, gender equality, and family planning. So overpopulation is the main focus. Human overpopulation is actually occurs when there are too many people for the environment to sustain, with breathable air, drinkable water, food, and so on. So we know that as we are going towards closing of 21st century, we'll see that the air that we breathe is getting limited in supply. Water has become scarce. We need to purchase even drinking water. Food is a huge issue. Hunger, poverty has been increasing, and this has happened despite development in technology, despite scientific progress and development. And what is the reason? The reason is overpopulation. So when we talk about population and why it is alarming or why we should be concerned about the increasing population, we look into some of the data, facts, which will help us understand the seriousness of the issue. Number one is life expectancy. It's growing. It's kind of predicted by a lot of organizations that it's going to be 77 years. So the more we kind of increase the life expectancy, the number of population will be more, and the ratio between the population and the environment will become more disparate. So 2007, 67-year-old was the worldwide life expectancy rate. It is then predicted that we get by 2050, the life expectancy age will be 77 years old. The second important fact is the world population is growing at a rapid pace by approximately 83 million people per year. So you can imagine the struggle to get access to the resources. The third important fact, despite the population rates are growing, we are surprised to learn that worldwide birth rate has actually fallen since 1960. So though the birth rate is following, what is happening is the death rate is also following. So when life expectancy has increased, if you look into the population pyramid, the upper curve, apex of this kind of expanding. So therefore, it is kind of aggregate, the population is on increase. So these are some of the facts related to World Population Day. Now let us try to understand key concepts when we try to understand population, or what in social sciences is referred as demography. Demography is the study of population. So there are a lot of concepts that we need to be familiar in order to understand the issue and problems of population. So sociology, the population refers to a collection of human beings, a very simple definition. And demography is the statistical study of human population. So there's a lot of data that is like birth rate, death rate, mortality rate, infant mortality rate, maternal mortality rate. These are all part of demography. So the term population covers two main areas. One is reproductive, maternal, and sexual health. And this is very important, specifically when it comes to women, because we are kind of putting on the burden of the population on the women, and that kind of takes us away from women's body, women's reproductive health. So it requires a health system which will address the concerns of women. The second is the level on trends in birth rate, death rate, and migration. So if we look into these rates, it will help us to understand the growth and age structure, which in demography generally refers to a population pyramid. So population growth rate tells us what is happening in the population in terms of whether it is growing, getting static, or it is kind of becoming less. So in most of the countries, the population is growing at a very high rate, and that leads to the concept of population explosion, which we know that a country like India is a part of. So population explosion is a condition in which there is a high increase rate of population due to decline in death rate with less decline in birth rate. This is because of improved economic development process. So, we are trying to understand why there is a decline in death rate. One of the reason is because of the growth in medical sciences, which has kind of invented a diagnosis of almost lot number of diseases, life-taking ailments. So, because of development, economic improvement, the death rate is declining. The birth rate is declining, but it is not kind of at a very fast rate, though there is a very kind of a stagnant decline in birth rate, and therefore it leads to population explosion. The third concept is population dividend, a phenomena which occurs when the proportion of working population out of the total population is high. Now, what is the working population? The working population is generally in the age, say, of 18 to say 40, 45, which is the age when individuals are working. So, if that is kind of larger, which in the pyramid if we see is the mid part, then the population will be in a fruitful stage, because then they will take care of the non-working population. The share of the working age population is larger than the share of non-working population. The fourth concept is population dynamics. Now, what is population dynamic? It refers to how population of a species changes over time. So, dynamics means change. So, we need to look into any say country population demographic profile. We see how it is changing, how whether it is increasing, whether it is decreasing, or there is no change. The study of this is kind of refers to population dynamic. The study of species population dynamics seeks to answer few questions. Number one, what explains average abundance of a population? And number two, what causes fluctuation in abundance? That is, it will kind of make an understanding of factors that are responsible for increase in population, or if there is a lot of fluctuation in and when we look into the population data, it will say in a decade it increased very drastically, and then it might be declining, again there is an increase. So, what are the factors that causing the fluctuation? In order to properly understand population dynamics, we kind of turn to demography, which we have learned, that is the study of the population. Three critical aspects of demography, or we can say three ways to understand population dynamic, is fertility, mortality, and migration. So, now let us try to understand the three in order to help understand what is population dynamics. So, we look into these three processes, which is fertility and fecundity. Fertility and fecundity basically refers to the birth rate. Mortality refers to the death rate, and migration. Migration is movement of people, movement from rural area to urban area, from one country to the other country. So, there is all kinds of migration which will make a difference to the population pyramid, and that is why migration becomes very important. Now, fertility rate refers to the ability of females to produce healthy offspring in abundance. So, it is kind of depends on the health of the women. If a country takes care of the health, maternal health, then the female mortality rate will be less and the birth rate will be good. Fecundity is the potential reproductive capacity of a female. So, there can be a natural increase in the fertility and fecundity. When birth rate is higher than the death rate, more people are being born than are dying, so the population grows. There can be a natural decrease, and when will there be a decrease? When the death rate is very high. For instance, if there is any epidemic or there is any kind of drought, famine, so these could lead to a death of a large population, and it will lead to a decline in death rate. Some of the demographic measures used in relation to fertility and fecundity are crude birth rate. What is a crude birth rate? It is the annual number of lives birth per 1,000 people. And then we have a general fertility rate, the annual number of live births per 1,000 women in the childbearing age. What is the childbearing age of a woman? It is generally 15 to 44. Due to industrialization, urbanization, they can be increased. It could be fertility age is now towards 18 or 20, and but it is an average fertility rate. Then we have age-specific fertility, the annual number of live births per 1,000 women in specific age. And next is total fertility rate, the number of live birth per woman completing her reproductive life at current age-specific fertility rate. So that's the fertility rate. Second is mortality. Mortality refers to the number of deaths in a given time or space to the proportion of death in relation to the population. And how do we understand mortality? There are certain statistical terms. One is crude death rate, which is annual number of deaths per 1,000 people. Infant mortality rate, the annual number of deaths of children less than 1 year of per 1,000 live birth. Then we have maternal mortality rate, which is very high in India, and it needs to kind of draw attention towards women's health. This is the number of registered maternal death due to birth or pregnancy related complication per 100,000 registered live births. Just in very common language, it is the death of female during pregnancy or during the birth of a child. Life expectancy. Life expectancy is the number of years which an individual at a given age can expect to live at present mortality rate. In India, the mortality rate according to 2011 was 67. The third important concept is migration. And as I already said, migration refers to the movement of people into and out of a specific area. In addition to the population size, migration impacts the demographic character. There is a difference also between internal migration and international migration. So, internal migration is within the country. For in India, there is a lot of migration from rural areas to urban areas. And international migration is when people leave one country and go to the other country, and the terms are immigration and emigration. So, we know there is a lot of movement of people within the country and between country. So, internal occurs because of obviously the pull factor, where the urban areas pull people towards it for better job, better income, and also in terms of push factor, where the conditions of living is not adequate, there are not enough jobs, there are not enough employment, it pushes people to move out of that area. A very important concept in demography is sex ratio. India's sex ratio is 940 as per census 2011. It was 933 in 2001. So, we see that this sex ratio is kind of very problematic. What does it hint at? It hints at the neglect of women, where a large number of girl child are not allowed to take birth because of sex selections, and even if they are, then there is a lot of feticides. And that is the reason why the number of girls compared to boys is less. Several neglect of girl babies, infancy leads to high death rate among girls is responsible for this. We have sex specific abortions, though we have the PCPNDT Act in the country, but despite that, sex selection abortions are very high. That leads to the killing of the female fetus in the wombs of the women. And it has led to a lot of problems related to the population, where we see in many states there are no women. There are no women for the boys or men to marry. So, they bring women from other states, and that could create cultural conflict. Lot of violence, domestic violence, violence related to women have increased. So, it is an issue related to population. When we look into population and society, we need to understand the impact of increased population on economic development. It is very closely related. The quantity, quality, structure, distribution and movement of population can either help the country to develop economically or hinder the country. So one of the debates that we kind of many a time hear is that a lot of technically trained person or technical population of a country moves out. So that could lead to a kind of deterrence to the country economic development. A developed country with low population density needs an increase in population. Why? Because in order to have more manpower, increase the manforce. But then, on the other hand, an underdeveloped country with high population density will have to kind of do away with a number of human beings or working hand. Why? Because it cannot afford to give employment to all. It will lead to underemployment, or it will lead to kind of lot of disguised employment. That is, in one work you will see a number of individuals are working. Where the work has to be done by one individual, it will be done by multiple. So it is a kind of disguised unemployment. Now, very important cause of the population concern is the environmental concern. Environmental concern in the sense that we are all aware of this, that the overpopulation is leading to lot of ecological problems like fragmentation of land holding, collapsing fisheries, shrinking forest, rising temperature. Everywhere we are facing this increase in temperature, global warming, loss of animals and plant species. So these are all the result of overpopulation. The entire ecosystem is kind of disturbed. All over the media we are aware that tourism kind of has disturbed the ecosystem. So we see a lot of human waste kind of entering into the oceans, into the pure air. So the air that we breathe has got polluted. The water that we drink is also kind of getting day by day lower quality. The fisheries, the live animal species are all at the danger of threat because of overpopulation. Overpopulation also has health implication, and we know hunger and poverty is increasing. India's transition is into problematic because we have a large population which is a working population. So this working population has to be a healthy population. But because of the increase in the size of the population, healthcare facility, education facilities cannot be provided to one and all. As a result, we are kind of having an n number of health complicated process. So it helps us to understand that population problem has become a huge problem, concern, and each one of us should be conscious about it and make efforts to reduce or at least control the population growth. Only then will this day, that is World Population Day, will become meaningful. With this, I come to an end of today's lecture. Thank you.